Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. I'm Dan Stilgo, marketing manager at Blend, and joined by Phil Valander, co-founder at Blend, as usual. And in this episode, it's one that I'm really excited to cover. We're diving into what we're calling the marketing skill gap. And this is definitely a conversation we need to have right now, because we're seeing marketing teams probably wearing more hats than ever before, but struggling to drive real business impact than ever before as well. It's really fascinating how the requirements for marketing success have dramatically shifted over the last decade, and even more so probably like accelerated shift over the last like 2 or 3 years, meaning a lot of marketers simply can't keep up with these things. And Phil, I think it's really relevant right now because we're seeing businesses invest heavily in marketing but not getting the returns expected out of it. And that is all down to this skill gap that's formed in marketing. This podcast is brought to you by Blend. We're a B2B website and demand generation agency. We work with ambitious businesses just like yours to create and execute effective demand generation strategies that drive pipeline for your business. We also recognize that your website is the most important asset you have in marketing. So we specialize in building scalable websites on HubSpot that convert the demand that you've created. If you want to find out more about our services and see real results that we've generated for businesses, visit blendb2b.com. Do you want to just kick things off by covering what that skill gap is that we're seeing?
I mean, you're absolutely right. There's more and more focus and expectation being placed on marketing all the time because of shifting buyer behavior. They are responsible for able to influence much more of the buying journey, but their ability to make sound investments, to spend money well, to drive results, with given that opportunity is impaired by the skill gap that exists. And thought a lot about this and read up a fair amount on it recently too to prepare. And I think although there's a number of ways to look at it and frame it, the gap that exists, the fundamental gap that exists within marketing teams at businesses is a data and analytics gap. And it's not about there being a shortage or an absence of data. I think most marketers would agree that they know how to get hold of data. They've probably got tons of it, too much perhaps. And it's not even really an unwillingness or a lack of appreciation that data needs to be analysed. For me, it's really the analytical mindset that's applied when looking at the data that we have available to us. Looking at the data in a way that enables us to make like realistic decisions and interpret it in realistic ways that guide us towards real results. And to critically challenge advice we're given, playbooks we're following, tools and tactics we're using, if and when the result that we get back from doing those things isn't positive for our business. And so when we see marketers investing in software, deploying their budget on channels and on platforms, and measuring in ways that are limited in scope, you can often see this diversion, this gap in terms of marketing working really hard to achieve marketing KPIs and outcomes, but their business isn't seeing the impact. So the skill gap is not one solely of creative ability, ability to use AI, digital competence. It's not about execution necessarily. It's about the ability to analyze the information at your disposal in order to guide and direct that activity towards a positive outcome. And although that's the root of it, it of course exists for a variety of reasons, and it takes shape and has impact in a variety of reasons, which just fascinate us daily, seeing marketers wrestle with this.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that I think a gap as well is not understanding buyer behavior and buyer preferences, but that insight comes out of data analysis.
Indeed.
And if you look at the data the right way and understand it the right way and analyze it in the way that you should, then all of that insight is going to come out anyway. Marketing's really interesting, right? Because there is no particular education and way in to marketing that's standardized across the board. It's
No.
like the wild west of kind of like education.
Yeah.
You can get into marketing in so many different ways. You've got salespeople that become marketers. You've got engineers like yourself
Yeah, exactly.
that become marketers. You've got marketers like me that actually,
Live and breathe.
studied marketing. All these different ways into marketing, which then hone in different skills, like naturally, which you've learned in other areas of life and in other responsibilities as well. Yeah, so it's really interesting. Unlike, medical or accounting, where you've got strict things that you need to learn and understand in a standardized format, marketing is just crazy in terms of the skills that are required over time.
Yeah, and there's a complete lack of unified ways of looking at, doing, and measuring marketing, and none have developed. It's interesting because sales teams in some respects are rather lucky that there's quite there's a sort of accepted, almost standardized way to analyze performance within a sales process. A product perhaps of the nature of the data they have at their disposal. So much of what we're trying to do in marketing is truly unmeasurable. Ultimately influence the way buyers think about our solution to their problem, that I can understand why it's hard to reach a unified, agreed way of looking at it, but we do have to change our approach, because operating, in a way that's devoid of a standardized or a standardized way of looking at the data that we have available leads us down some really some wrong paths in terms of where we spend our time, money, and focus our efforts. But like you say, you can come into marketing from a huge variety of scenes and backgrounds, and even the educational one doesn't necessarily tackle the challenge of turning marketing effort into business results, which is a real problem for marketing teams in B2B especially, right?
Yeah, the biggest problem. The trouble is with this, though, I think marketers are almost a product of their environment that they find themselves in. If you're in a business that's operating quite traditionally in the sense of marketing results and measurement and tactics and strategy, then you're going to find yourself leaning more into those things when it comes to marketing and in everything you do. And even the people around you that you learn from, like they are all a product of your capabilities and your skill set that you develop to do this kind of data analysis. Like if you don't have anybody educating you on how to do it and telling you what you should look for and what you should do, like you will never know. So I think, one of the points that I want to make here is that a lot of the time you need to look outside of your organization for ways to do this and to better yourself in terms of data analysis and understanding what's really required for business success, because a lot of the times the organization you're in will restrict you from understanding those things.
Yeah, you also need to look outside of your immediate data set sometimes. So I think marketers, we had a turning point when performance marketing, became possible. As the internet evolved, social media platforms became places to advertise, attention was available to us in those places. And of course, they come with a lot of measurement. The challenge marketers face is understanding when the measurement that they have available to them as a result of using a platform or using a performance marketing technique, when the measurements that they have available to them do and do not correlate with business KPIs, outcomes, and results. And of course, performance marketing was great for marketers because it took them from a completely unmeasurable landscape where you'd put up a billboard and you'd be looking at lift, which you can measure, but is really sort of not directly connected. And it gave them all this data and measurement with which to sort of optimize. And they're very good at doing it, right? And to my earlier point, like there's analytics taking place there. And it's very good analytics, and I believe marketers are capable of it. But the challenge they face is knowing when what they're measuring, what they're analysing, what they're optimising does and doesn't correlate with what they're trying to achieve at a bigger level. So being able to look outside of your role, as it were, look outside of your immediate data set and identify the broader data picture that you need in order to optimise around your goals is an important skill. There's other challenges as well. So, for example, within marketing, we often see usually acronyms being thrown around that refer to pieces of data which are positioned as being either better or worse than the ones you're using now as measures of your impact. But it's really hard for marketers, really hard for me even, to know when the data point we're talking about is a measure of something that happened historically or a forecast of something that might happen in the future. And there's loads of subtlety to data and analytics that really changes whether you can trust a piece of data in the way that you're trying to trust it, and what data you need to use to inform yourselves around your goals. And so it's a really deep area where there isn't a lot of education on it, and it's a challenge for all marketers to grasp it, I think. If anybody's interested in getting better at this, then do follow a gentleman called Dale Harrison on LinkedIn, because he's absolutely legendary at explaining like what data really is and when and why you can use it for certain things. So on the subject of LTV versus CAC payback versus sales velocity, etc., he explains these things really, really well and tells you exactly how you can and can't use them to inform yourself about marketing goals and KPIs.
Yeah, would be great to get him on, actually.
Wouldn't it be amazing?
Yeah. Stay tuned for that. I think now just kind of breaking out of some of that and looking at the issues that this skill gap causes is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And there was something you shared with me yesterday, Phil, actually, in a community. Somebody talking about lead scoring and lead nurturing and how they've been battling with their lead nurturing and lead scoring model. And they've changed sales rep to have a dedicated person solely responsible for these leads that are scored and nurtured. And yet the results are still the same. They're generating all these leads. They even get some booked and qualified calls out of it. And yet when it comes to pipeline and revenue, absolutely nothing. At which point do you question the approach versus the tactic and the strategy? Because that's the skill gap.
Yeah.
That's the skill gap right there. It's looking at the data and thinking, right, we have optimized this in the best way we possibly can. We're doing everything by the book and like all the best practices are implemented. When do you question the approach? Like you have to go back to fundamentals.
It's the thing we're doing that is the problem. And it probably speaks to your point, like to a lack of having the right data and being able to look at it in the right way to build an argument and to build a case for doing things differently. And the consequence is marketers just go around in loops, don't they? They just go round and round and round, optimizing for the things that they have best visibility of, most control over, even when they're completely unrelated to business outcomes. So tweaking your lead scoring model in that scenario is quite unlikely, if not completely unlikely, to remedy the really, really poor performance of that particular approach. And we ought to be able to say, as marketers, our data tells us we can stop doing this and spend that time and that money some other way. And yet we don't. We go round and round the loop again and again.
Yeah. It just blows my mind that marketers continue to do this. And I think this is kind of part of that comfort zone that we mentioned before. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, we've kind of always done that. We've always seen some results from it. So let's just continue to do it. Okay, maybe in 2015 you saw some results from lead nurturing and lead scoring when it wasn't so saturated, like gated content wasn't saturated across every single channel. Buyers weren't being spammed by emails to, download this guide or watch this on-demand webinar. But now the tables have completely turned and you need to have a fundamental understanding of buyer behavior and buyer preferences. And that comes out of your data. Your data is going to tell you that, oh, interestingly, buyers that are downloading this content and even booking calls of salespeople aren't converting into pipeline and revenue. I wonder why that is. It's because their behavior and preferences to the approaches that you're taking have changed, and you need to be able to adapt to that and step outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah, you have, and you've got to be able to challenge the status quo in your own mind and in your organization. And I think one of the things that the skill gap leads to is a lack of the ability and to some extent the courage to go against the popular narrative. I'm concerned for marketers that the voices of incredibly popular, incredibly well-funded platforms and vendors are convincing them to do things against their own interests. You know, I often think about these advertising platforms, and I wonder how, what's the ratio in the B2B segment of their, you know, operation? What's the ratio of advertising money spent with them versus pipeline created? It should be many, many times more pipeline created for advertisers than advertising budget spent. But based on the data I've seen, I suspect it's not.
Absolutely.
I suspect there's a lot more money being spent on advertising on these platforms than there is return being generated. But so many marketers feel unable to like break away from that model. It's the way we've done it. It's the way it's done. So we should keep doing it and optimize and tweak and get an extra 0.1% performance out of it, when maybe the data would say, stop it altogether. Go a different route to market, you know, reach your buyers a different way with a different, you know, message. But our inability to like turn off what we're hearing from outside and use our data, our common sense, our intelligence, and our insights into our buyer to guide our strategy is somewhat impaired. And I think that's a big consequence of the skill gap that we're seeing, you know, develop in marketing.
Yeah, and you kind of referenced it just then in the fact that marketers are trying to optimize things all the time. It's because marketers find themselves stuck in execution mode almost all the time, with the inability to step back and take business context and use business acumen to take a strategic approach to what they're actually doing. They're stuck in the weeds trying to optimize this campaign and increase click-through rate by 0.01% and changing this button color to do this. And it's like, these aren't going to have the big 10x, 5x impact on your business. Like, they're not really going to drive growth. They will help you optimize these tiny little things, but I think to be a good marketing leader, like, you need to take a step back, take the business context into consideration and have a strategic mindset and get out the weeds where you can, have a fundamental understanding of it, but don't live there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I think I've seen that argument both ways. That there's a perception that marketers sort of aspire to be in strategic mode more than in execution mode, but I think on the ground you're right in reality, and there's a need for both. It's how you approach both that's so important. And one of the things that I've noticed marketers have a tendency to do, usually because of a lack of the right data and the right approach to analysing it, is to constantly be adding and constantly be looking for new things to incorporate in their marketing strategy, spreading themselves really thin, utilising tons and tons of different channels, methods, tactics, mediums, and software tools, when in reality, and Kieran Flanagan said this on LinkedIn yesterday very, very well, when in reality, like, marketing success, true marketing success in the form of business results, usually one is evident in your data already. Where are you getting your pipeline and revenue from already? What can you optimize there? Yeah. And it's normally from a relatively small or, you know, specific segment of your go-to-market playbook. You don't need hundreds of things to generate lots and lots of pipeline. You need a few things that work well to work really, really well. So to your point about being strategic, strategy isn't about looking for new things to add in. It's looking at your buyer and understanding them in order to refine the few things that you apply and employ to great effect. And if you can get that right, you can produce phenomenal results for your business. And that's the frustration, right? It's like marketers can actually create really phenomenal impact for their business if they get themselves focused on what matters and they lean into those things, and they resist the temptation to spread themselves too thin, to get stuck in the execution loop, to optimize incrementally when it's a failing strategy altogether. Like, these things need to change, and then you can just have this massive impact.
Yeah. I've heard this firsthand multiple times, which is marketers saying, like, what are we missing? What is that channel where our buyers are, where we're not? And usually it's staring you right in the face in your data, but your strategy and approach to that channel just isn't refined enough around what your buyers are looking for in that channel. Honestly, I've heard it so many times, like, what are we missing?
Yeah.
And generally, it is actually nothing. It's right there. You just need to double down on what you're doing.
Yeah, I can think of one possible objection to this sort of narrative, which is, well, like if we're not using LinkedIn today, for example, then how will we know/learn how to use it in the future, right? Good point. If you're not using it, then you can't possibly gather data that tells you how well you're using it. But my take on this is that every business needs a foundation of effective pipeline generating marketing. And if you're generating pipeline today, then you have some insight how to build that. And upon that foundation, you can build and test anything you like. And you can do it in a sound, strategic, informed way. So you can very easily build out a LinkedIn strategy because the world is telling you that LinkedIn is relevant, LinkedIn is an opportunity. But you can build it, test it, measure it, and refine it in your own way and against your own objectives, as opposed to just spending money on it, which is what a lot of marketers will end up doing if they take everyone says we've got to use it, so we will too, and they don't have that foundation in place with which to critically assess the impact and the results. So yes, you will have to eventually test new things, but the approach to testing them and the situation you need to be in before you do so has a big impact on what the outcome of that test might be.
Yeah, for sure. Just opening up a new point here, which again, I think comes from this skill gap around data analysis and not understanding business metrics and implementing them into your marketing measurement and marketing analysis, which is this cross-functional silo that happens. Marketing is pulled out of the rest of the business that's looking at business KPIs and measuring pipeline and revenue. Marketing's on its own over here, making things look pretty, while sales are, struggling to hit their pipeline and revenue target. And as well, I think marketers don't try enough to understand other functions and what truly matters to them. If you just put yourself in sales shoes for just a moment and you think, right, I'm going to send sales 100 leads that have downloaded this ebook and they can follow up with them. You don't think that, right, sales have now got to spend a week following up with these leads, trying to call somebody who's got no interest in your product, who's never going to buy from you. They're going to miss their target. They're not going to get the commission that they need. And there's just this lack of understanding of the other functions, and it all comes back to data at the end of the day, because if you are measuring and caring about the same things, you're all working to the same goal, and you can collaborate better with everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of bred into marketers, isn't it, as well, which is to say that very few marketers will be educated, coached, empowered to seek, to gain, and to interrogate financial data. But within that analytical skill gap that exists, it's only a very short step to financial acumen. And the ability to analyze marketing data through a financial/business lens is the most critical component of that analytical skill gap. It's looking at the information you have in the context of the whole business, the cost to do something, the time it takes, the conversion rate into revenue. These are the things that matter more than the clicks on things, the impressions, the dwell times, the exit rates, etc., etc., etc. Those things are the North Stars because they help the business align around growth, align around success. And if one part of your organization isn't aligned to those goals, then by definition it's pulling in a different direction. And that's probably the most harmful consequence that you see when you get a marketing team of talented, ambitious, capable individuals, but they're pulling in a different direction. Means the leads that they're passing to sales either don't close or they don't get followed up on at all because they didn't close historically. Sales are having to target a completely different set of people. That alone should tell you something's amiss, something's off about who you're getting into your lead pool, as it were. And you're not pulling in the same direction. Your vectors are not aligned with that of the rest of the operation. So really, you're kind of working against yourselves. So being able to look at it financially, look at pipeline, look at revenue, look at the cost to do things, consider the sales resource that it takes to close something. These are all important things to put into the mindset of marketers if they want to have measurable, tangible, visible impact that's perceived positively by their organization. If you want to build that foundation of like effective pipeline generating marketing, then you need to kind of bookend your data with two things. One is pipeline level visibility, like how much pipeline and revenue are we creating, and where is it coming from within the things that we're producing as a marketing team. Ultimately, which type of leads from what sources become pipeline and which ones don't, because the ones that don't are of no use to you. The ones that do are what you want to build your strategy around ultimately. Then you can work back through all the marketing data you have, but if you put on the end self-reported attribution to give you insight beyond what software can tell you, beyond what analytics can tell you, not in a way that is 100% completely reliable and trustworthy, because no marketing data really is, but it's insight that nevertheless gets you past what you can gather with software and with tools. And you can now look at, okay, the leads that become pipeline, what do they look like in our CRM? What's the journey they take? And what are they telling us are the things that are driving them to us in the first place? You're now in a position to start optimizing your marketing around business outcomes, around real results that reflect revenue. And that's the starting point for the change that many need to make.
Yeah. And I suppose just to finish things off here with what can marketers do if they're listening to this and thinking, oh, maybe I am part of that skill gap issue and like need to fill a few gaps there. What is the path forward for them? And I think firstly it's starting with, some like self-reflection in terms of where are the gaps like that are currently within the marketing function. Like, are we genuinely looking at data in the right way?
Yep.
If not, what can we do about it? Firstly, I think it's learning like what to look at and how to look at it from the right people.
Yep.
So whether that's inside of your organization, which it might be in a different function. It might be the sales leader. It might be the finance leader. It might be somebody else in the marketing team, the RevOps team, whoever it may be, that's really insightful and good with data analysis. Like, you need to be working with them to see what you can improve in terms of marketing.
Yep.
And I suppose it's looking at who you need to potentially bring into your team as well to help you dive deeper in that data. I think every single marketer should have a fundamental understanding of data, but they don't always need to go into the weeds of things and like dig into the analysis that is required at huge companies.
Yeah.
Like, it might not be needed for that leader to do that. They need the fundamental understanding, but understanding when to bring in a specialist or an agency to help with that kind of thing is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing your own capability and your shortcomings and using external resource to supplement that is a key strategy to take. And yeah, like you said, it's knowing where the data that you need resides and building bridges between you and it, either through the people, the CFO, the head of finance, the head of sales, whoever it is. Because basically, as a marketing team, you can only optimize as far as you can see. If as far as you can see is an MQL number, then you will do everything you can to optimize that number. But if you can't see what happens beyond that number, which of those MQLs turn into meetings booked, opportunities in the pipeline, close on revenue, then then it's impossible for you as a marketer to optimize around those metrics. So you need to be able to push your data visibility further down the purchase path. In most cases, there may be situations where you also need to push up, right? But for the majority of marketers, it's a need to look deeper and further into the business than they currently do. And that might require support from across the business, and you've got to work to break down silos. And in large organizations, as you say, for an SME, a marketing manager is the person that should look at themselves to see whether they have this gap and try to fill it, because they are probably capable of doing everything their company needs in terms of gathering and analysing data in the right way. But of course, as you say, as your organisation grows and there's more at stake, then you might need specialist resources in the form of data analysts or the support of external consultants and agencies to be able to do a good job quickly and move the needle on it. And that is indeed where I think the opportunities lie for marketers at various sizes of business. But yeah, you need to be able to say, I've got the data that I need in order to be able to do a good job for my company, and I'm looking at it in the right lens and interpreting it in the right way to have an impact.
Yeah, that I just want to finish by double clicking. I know we like that phrase on that point around you can only optimize as far as you can see. Such a great point. Like marketers, you need to find a way to get that data around pipeline and revenue.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what form it takes. Is it a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Is it a different software that you need a license in and that you need to go and find? Do you need to build that integration between two pieces of software? Whatever it may be, you need to get that data in order to prove marketing's ROI and deliver the best results possible for the business.
Yeah.
There is no other way around it.
I think the analytical mindset, the right analytical approach, like would often result in marketers reevaluating, and businesses actually reevaluating, like the value of various different things within their business. So, for example, would 20k be better spent on paid advertising or an integration between our sales and marketing systems? I'd wager that in most cases the integration would be more valuable because it would show you how to generate more pipeline as opposed to the advertising spend, which will generate you a ton of leads that may or may not go anywhere.
We don't know.
You know, but so often businesses are putting their money, lots of it, to generate these marketing results without the ability to analyze them in a business context. And that's where the waste comes in, right? And that's what the skill gap being addressed represents as an opportunity, which is to stop that waste and apply the budget, whether it's software, integrations, website, channels, tactics, content, advertising, apply it right, put it into places where it can drive business value, and just have incredible success as a result.
Yeah, we covered that on an episode called Working versus Non-Working Budget, I think it was. And yeah, all I would say is go back and listen to that because we kind of cover where to deploy these marketing budgets that you have.
Yeah.
Because it's not always in ad spend and driving more leads and pipeline. It might be in, how you can look at that data and analyze it further.
Completely.
All right, let's wrap it up there. A really important episode, I think, for all marketers out there to learn from and understand because this skill gap is only growing. The gap is getting bigger. So keep up or be left behind is what I say.
Yep.
All right, let's wrap it up. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.